Hello there everyone, Inky Fingers here, and this is Inky Fingers Architectural Art. Now today I'm going to be experimenting with different papers, as depending which paper you use, you can get widely different results. So this is the picture I'm going to paint, a nice little manor type house in the middle of a little moat. We have some nice perspective going on, 3/4 view, and very important, we have some nice shadows on the right hand side, so we can get lots and lots of contrast. So different papers of course give you widely different results, of which I'll explain in a second. But this is the picture that we're going to paint, and I think it should make quite an interesting picture. But the purpose of this video is, as I said, I'm going to use 3 different papers, and the paper I'm going to use is, here we have some Bockingford hot pressed. Hot pressed paper is incredibly smooth. It's like drawing paper, and it's called hot press because when they make the paper they put the paper through heated rollers which flatten the paper out and give it this very smooth surface. Then here we have, again, this is a sheet of Bockingford, but this is Bockingford knot. Why do they call it knot? Well, because it's not smooth and it's not rough. It's an average, a mid-grained paper, but this will give a little bit more texture than this hot press paper. And then finally, coming over to this sheet of paper, this is ash, which of course is a rag paper, and this ash is rough. So when this is completed, I think you should see 3 quite individual pictures. And as you can see, it's all been drawn out in pencil, but I am going to pen them in, of course, and I'm going to use a dip-in steel nib pen and a bottle of Winsor & Newton India ink. I am going to do a little bit of pen work on each picture so we can see how the pen behaves on this ultra smooth surface watercolour paper, to the Bockingford knot, and to the nice lovely rough organic ash. Now starting with the hot press, I'll just do a little bit along the side on this roof. Now this should go on quite nice. Actually, this isn't actually the hot press, it's the Bockingford knot, but it hasn't got much of a grain to it. And we can see just really how smooth this pen goes on to this paper. It glides on, but as it should, because without any real texture in the paper, it should just glide across it, which it does. So that's all I'll do on that. Now I'll swap over to now the hot press. I will do exactly the same. Now this paper, you can instantly feel it just really does just glide over the paper. It feels different than using mixed media paper. It's mixed media paper. It's not watercolour paper. It is thick paper, but it still has a little bit of grain. While this here is in fact very smooth. And that goes over there really nice. And then over to the ash. Now, I don't know if you can hear that, but the pen is really scratching across this rough surface. So it's made of 100% rag. And it is very much more scratchy on this paper, this is this is nice because it gives you a nice bit of organicness. But that is really scratchy. So if we examine these lines now, ash, rough, you can see how the line is broken. I was putting some pressure on, but because of the roughness on the paper and the rag, because it's rag, we can see what that's like. We go over to the hot press. We can see it's very, very smooth. No broken lines whatsoever. It's just, it goes on beautifully. And of course, the knot paper, Bockingford knot, similar to the hot press, but you can see it is ever so slightly more ragged because it's got a little bit more of a grain than the hot press, but nowhere near as much grain as the ash. So even now, just doing a few lines, each paper looks different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the whole of the inking in on all three pictures, and then I'll be back and I'll do basically what I've just done here, but with the paint. I'll do a little bit of painting on one picture, and then with the same colours, the same washes, I'll go on to the next one, and then I go on to the final piece, so we can see it in sort of real time how the paint is actually behaving on each piece of paper. Right, so that's all three pictures inked in. Now once they're all finished, there is a marked difference. I felt a marked difference. Now first, if we go to the hot press, one thing I noticed when sketching it out, and that's what it was, because of the smoothness of the paper, it was just like sketching on drawing paper. I tried not to. I tried to keep them, all three of them, pretty much identical. But with the hot press, because it's so smooth and quite nice for us to sketch on, so to speak, my hand was much more looser. You could sort of doodle almost to go over the pencil lines. The knot paper, or the medium grain paper, as this was, it's not as smooth as a hot press, but it's a medium grain, so it hasn't really got much grain. The pen still sort of flowed over very, very nicely, and you could almost again, like the hot press, draw it on a sketchily type of way. And then finally with the ash, well, this was definitely the most enjoyable paper to draw on, because the pen did sort of skip and jump over the very rough grain of this paper, and because as I've already said, it is 100% rag paper, completely different composition than the other two, than Bockingford. So with this you could get, I think, a lot more of like an artistic, unique type of look with the pen, but very enjoyable to ink in. So now all I have to do is to get some paint on them. So what I've done first is I have put masking fluid around the edges of all three pictures. So when I do the sky, I can at least go over and not worry about getting sky colour onto the building itself. So I'm going to do these skies, hopefully try to do them identically, and it's all going to be done on dry paper. And the colours I'm going to use for the sky is ultramarine blue with a touch of crimson alizarin, yellow ochre with a touch of Naples yellow, and this is French ultramarine and a little bit of burnt sienna, just for some any sort of dark underneath the clouds. So starting with hot press. Now this is just going to blobble around, as we can see. I don't use hot press really at all, because quite frankly I don't really like it. But as for this bit of experimentation, we'll have a little bit of white fluffy clouds at the top. We go into this yellow ochre mix and just sort of go around here. This tree's going to be there. Just blend the bottom in so we're not getting any hard edges, because it does tend to usually tends to dry quite quick on this paper. You can see how it blobbles around there. So what I can do here is just to help it up a little bit and just get some toilet roll, kitchen roll or whatever, a rag, and just try and soften this edge up a little bit. But we can see how it does stain. We'll have a little bit of this dark. It needs to be a little bit darker, I think. And we'll leave it something like that. Just let it do what it wants to do. It will just do what it wants to do, because it's got no grain to actually keep it in place, the water in place, or the paint. And that's that. Now we're going up to the Bockingford knot. Now I'm just going to try and do the same thing. Now we can see here a little bit more of the grain of the paper, even though it is quite a mechanical grain, I think. Ultramarine is a granulating colour, so we'll just have some there. So we will get a bit of grain showing through. I'll fill that in. I'll just try and make it the same. So you can get a little bit more dry brush with this paper. Then we go into the yellow ochre mix. Just blend that into that. Soften the edge up again. Now the paint is much more grippy on this paper. We go into the shadow colour. Just put some of that on there. Let it do what it wants to do again. Get a little bit under here. Once again, I'm just going to push in with a bit of rag just to help soften those tops of the clouds up just a little bit, just so it's a little bit like the same as this one. And then just let that dry. We've got a nice fleck of white there, like a bit of cloud, simply because it's a rougher paper than the hot press. I will just put a touch more. I'm fiddling now, but I will just put a touch of yellow in that, just a hit. So I'll leave that and let it just do what it wants to do, and then we'll see. And then finally going over to the Ash Rough. Now this should behave completely different. Now once again just a bit of dry brush, and we can instantly see now how the paint just drags over this beautiful rough surface, this beautiful textured surface. So that we'll put some paint around here. And with this paper you're going to get a lot more of this little white flecks of cloud. This is a soft brush, by the way, so it does help if you've got a sable brush. We'll put some blue over there just to make it look the same as the others. Then in there, in the yellow ochre mix, and we'll put a little bit of that mix around here. This tree's going to be there again, remember, so it doesn't really matter too much. Get some yellow here. Now you can also, with this, you can blend in like I did there very easily. It's a lot easier than we did with the other pieces of paper. And again, we'll just stick a bit of this dark under some of these clouds. A little bit here, a little bit down here. Just let it run. I really want it to do what it wants to do. And as we did with the other one, just to keep it consistent, just a little bit of dabbing, just to soften up a little bit here and there, trying to keep it consistent with the other two. We'll leave that to dry. Right, now they've all dry, so now we can have a little look at what these skies have turned out like. You can see they're quite different, but let's have a look close up. Hot press, very smooth. We can see that the sky, it's got some hard edges, naturally, because it's got no grain, no troughs for the water to sort of settle into and basically stay put. Then it just flows everywhere, which can be a nice thing. But you see it's quite fluid, quite loose. Now if we go to the Bockingford knot, we can see now it's still got some quite hard edges, because it's not got that much grain on this paper. You can see the grain itself within the paper, which is rather artificial. Of course, this paper doesn't have any grain, but you can see the natural granulation because of the ultramarine blue. You can see natural granulation here and there, but it's where it falls into the grain of the paper. But you can see that the grain is not a very nice grain, I don't think, personally. But we could get a lot more flecks of light because of the dry brush, but not too bad. But now we go to the ash, and we can see now that the top portions of the clouds are much more ragged because of the roughness of this paper, and the rag content behaves completely different with a brush. And we have a lot more flecks of light here and there just because of the roughness of the paper. And it does look different because rag paper, it soaks in differently. It behaves completely differently than pulp paper like the other two. But again, all three in one, you can see there is a difference between each one. So next we paint the house. Now the chimney pots, I've just mixed up some light red and I put some cadmium red in. And for the roofs, or some of the roofs, this is raw sienna, a little bit of neutral tint to darken it down, then just a touch of the light red. So starting with the hot press, just put it on, and as ever, as you can see, it blobbles around, goes on extremely smoothly. Now to the knot, and then instantly the paint is much more grippy onto this paper because it's got some grain to it. And then finally into the lovely ash, and now I can really feel the difference. This is now really gripping this brush. The paint is laying on the paper in a very much more controlled fashion because of the roughness and of course the composition of the paper itself. You have to have a much more paint on the brush than the other two. Well, if you didn't have enough paint on the brush, then you would definitely get dry brush on this. It would really drag across like so. You get all these nice little flecks. And I'll do exactly the same with the roofs using the raw sienna neutral tint. But back to the hot press. And it's just so much of a different feel. Now one thing we can see, now these roofs are painted, that on this picture, the hot press, because the desk is just raised just very slightly, the wash will travel downwards but from gravity. On this picture you can see how it has, because it's so smooth, the paper, it's got as the water, the wash has got nothing to grab hold of. It just pulls down into this area here, and as it starts, and this is now dry, we can see it's dry because it's very much lighter. This is still wet. This is now going to run back upwards into there and probably perhaps cause some cauliflowers, which sometimes you may not want. So that could be a problem. But that's what you get with this type of paper. Whereas the knot, which is it's rougher, not that much rougher, but it has got a grain on it. We can see now the wash is much more even. It hasn't sort of pooled up anywhere. It's much neater wash. And then of course on the rough paper, that will never ever happen. It's completely controlled because it's rough paper, and the wash goes into the little valleys, the little troughs into the paper, and it becomes more controlled and manageable. And while all this is drying, I'm going to go to this Pentel brush pen, which I've used on previous videos. It's filled with Liquitex Professional Black Carbon ink via a little cartridge, and I'm going to basically paint in with the ink all of the window panes, because they are quite dark in the picture and I don't want it to be overcomplicated. Now that's the hot press painted in or drawn in with this brush pen. Obviously, because it's so smooth, it goes on beautifully like drawing paper. I've just left one window left, so you can see just how easily that actually goes in. Absolutely glides over the surface. Now we turn to the Bockingford knot. Same window. Now because this is not too much of a grain, it still goes on rather nice. A little bit more draggy over the paper, but it goes on nice. And finally, with this pen, to the rough paper, the rough ash. Using a pen like this on the rough paper, completely different feel. You can feel the brush drag across the surface, and it does leave some natural dry brush, which is quite nice. Next job is to put this background tree in here, and some of the bushes, and probably it's this tree here or this bush. Now again, starting with the hot press, I've just got a light green and a dark green. Light green is a very acidy yellow green. This is just Azo Yellow Light, which is just like lemon yellow, and some jade green. For the darker green, this is jade green and French ultramarine. And this, I've just put more French ultramarine. It's still jade green, I've just put more French ultramarine in. And this colour is going to be for the background trees here. So just very simply, no real detail. Just put it in till the shoreline. Just like that. The knot, or cold press, or medium grain, whatever you want to call it. Again, we'll just put that there, and instantly you can see this is a much different type of texture. And then for the rough, we can actually do some nice dry brush. to get a nice sort of textured area at the top. And I'll do the same with these other bushes. And as ever, on the rough paper, the 100% cotton rag paper, it behaves much differently. It feels really nice to lay the brush on. And when you drop wet and wet, it just merges with the underwash much nicer than the Bockingford, which is a pulp paper. And of course it's not rough. And that's all the foliage done in the picture. Now for painting in the house. Depending on what photograph you look at, the house can be different colours. So I've mixed up various colours, ranging from some sort of grey greens to sort of light Naples yellow with a bit of light red in, French ultramarine and light red, and a touch of neutral tint just to get this darkish dirty red. And there's some Naples yellow with a little bit of neutral tint in. It's just a mishmash of colours. They won't be exactly correct, but I think they'll do for what I see on this printout. So all I'm going to be able to do on here is just sort of look at the picture and then just put in a wash of colours where I think all these different colours need to be. So once again, starting with the hot press, I'm just going to put in some light colours. Of course these need shadows on, which will have shadows on later on, but I'm just going to where these colours are. I can overlay some blocks, some darker colours here and there. I can go over the windows because the ink I've used in that pen is actually waterproof. Now I'm dropping this other colour in because it's hot press and it's of course very smooth. It does just the second wash just rests on and sort of mixes around on the surface of the first wash, which you can get some nice watery sort of views, watercolour type of views I should say. And that's the initial washes down on all three houses. Now if you look closely on the smooth paper, because it's got no grip, you can see we've got lots and lots of watermarks. The washes have dried on one part of the picture, remained wet on the other, especially as it's cockled a bit, and that leaves watermarks, cauliflowers, which can work on a building if you want. But this is what you get a lot on hot press paper. The knot paper, the Bockingford knot, the medium grain, you don't really get that. It's much more smoother. Then on the rough paper, again like the knot, you just don't get any of watermarks because it's much more controllable. Now I'm going to put some details in the pictures. Now this is what I always do by using just a small brush, in this case just a number 2 Klinsky Sable Rigger, I'm going to get the same sort of colour, put some colour on and then pull it around to make some watercoloury watermarks to represent sort of details, textures within the stone walls. Now this feels a lot different and it behaves a lot different than the hot press. You feel like you've got control over this because it's got a grain. There is a medium grained paper. Even though it's still Bockingford, just like the hot press, the paint stays where you want it with this one. You can pull this paint around a lot better with a bit of clean water. And produce some nice little like inverted bricks of stone. So we have all of the textures or the colours onto all three buildings. So now I'm going to put the shadows in to give some nice contrast. Now the shadow colour is going to be French ultramarine and light red to give just a nice little dull purple colour. So as we can see from the photograph, just as a reminder, everything on the right hand side is in shadow. Plus we've got some lovely shadows going across diagonally like this. So starting once again with the hot press, and once again this is just going to flow over the paper so easily. Now you've got to make sure you get this correct. So that's the shadows on the hot press. It went on beautifully, really smoothly, no issues whatsoever. So now we go to the Bockingford cold pressed or not or medium grain paper, and we'll see what that's like. And of course, instantly it behaves much different. You've got control on the paper for these big washes. The washes appear to be actually, to my eyes, darker. It's the same wash, same pigment, but it just appears a bit more darker than the previous. Probably it's because it's on different paper. But as ever, just bags of water on the brush or bags of pigment. Don't do it this dry. And then finally onto the arch roof. Now there's the shadows put in. The only other bit to put in now is really it's the water. So this is just a bit of cobalt blue and some neutral tint just to darken it up a little bit. I'm not really too bothered about if it's the accurate colour, the real colour of the sky, of the water, because in the photograph it's not. It's sort of a pea green colour with all the algae and whatever. But I just want it to match the sky a little bit. So putting this wash on the hot press, again, goes on very, very smoothly. Big wash on the knot paper, the medium grained. Again, it's much more scratchier. And if you wanted, like so, you could get a few bits of dry brush, which I think I'll keep. And on this, the roof, you should get a hell of a lot more dry brush. As you can see, it just skims across the surface. If you go over it and over it, then it starts to fill in the troughs and you get, well, it takes a dry brush out, it takes that sparkle out. But if you just do it once or twice, you get this lovely sparkle from the sky, reflecting down on the water. So that will do. Now I've just darkened this up a little bit. I've just put a touch more blue into this wash, and I'm just going to try and just put a little bit more extra tone using the flat of the brush. Now it's easy on this rough paper, the ash, because of the rag content. That looks quite nice. Quickly going over to this. It's still damp. I'll see if I can get some dry brush, which you can see, because it's much flatter, it's not as rough, it's very much more difficult to get any dry brush. So we'll leave that like that. And finally, the hot press. Now this is now dry. It's not going to get any blending whatsoever, and there's no way you're going to get any dry brush. So I will do this on dry paper so we can see what it's like. Same colour, same brush, same pressure of the brush, and I'm using the brush in more like the flat position so you get dry brush. So nothing's changed. As you can see, it just doesn't work. You don't get dry brush, you get these hard streaks. Which just don't, it looks unnatural. But we'll leave some of those little streaks there. Now I'm going to put a bit of reflection in the water, because it just doesn't look natural as such. So I've just mixed a little bit of raw sienna and a touch of neutral tint just to darken it up, just to give a sort of dirty colour. And I'm just going to pull that down. Very wishy-washy. Same with this one. Pull it down. And that's all three pictures completed with the moating. There's a few little extra things I need to do now. Well, I've got to put a few little window frames in, and I'm going to use a pen just to add a few little more details and accentuate a few things, just to add again a little bit more texture as it is a pen and wash. Now I've just been putting some pen. This is just a Uniball eye micro pen. It's a roller ball, but it's a 0.5mm nib, and it's waterproof and fade proof ink. Now I've just been going over some of the pictures, putting some little roof lines in, some little bits and bobs here and there, and of course on this hot press paper doing a little texture works beautifully. You can see the pen just glides over the paper, so you can draw on little sort of details that make it look like a bush or a tree or whatever. Just little scratches, little scribbles, but you don't even have to press on, and it works beautifully. It's strong, it's prominent, it's really nice. Even when you just press on, or basically hardly pressing on, the pen just makes a really good mark. So you can give the impression of like bricks in this part of the building, just lines with a few verticals putting through. Whereby the rougher papers, and this is the ash, you can see it is a lot more scratchy on this paper. It just does not sort of go on like the hot press. You've got to work at this a little bit more, but at the end of the day, because it's more scratchy, it's more finer, and you should be able to hear it's scratching across the roughness of the paper, the pen. But you've got to really work at this to get this texture in. But I think it does look better. It's just doodling really, to give the impression that it's going to be like a tree. Again, we'll just put a few little lines, barely touching the paper, just gives an impression there's maybe some bricks. It just scratches along the surface, sort of hitting and missing actually. It's a bit like dry brush, but this is with a ballpoint pen. So you can get some nice texture on, but it's not prominent, it's sort of here and there, which works well. Just strengthening these lines up here and there. I'm not looking at the photograph, I'm just doing it where I think it needs to be. A couple of little marks there. I do know there's some dark marks there, so instead of painting them in, we'll just touch them in with the pen. Some little marks around here. Some vertical lines there, so I'll just use this because utilise a really rough scratchy paper. We'll just put a few little scratchy lines here to utilise what's on the picture itself. And that's it. Pictures are finished. 3 identical pictures but on very different papers. Now looking at the picture that is on hot press paper, which is ultra smooth, no grain whatsoever, we can see how paint reacts on this paper. It's very wishy-washy. There's no real structure to the washes. They blobble around on the surface, they merge together. You get hard edges. It looks very, very illustrative, but it doesn't look too bad considering. The reflections are very watery, watermarks, cauliflowers everywhere, but it adds to the charm, I suppose. Next, moving on to the Bockingford not hot press paper, we can see that it's the paint itself is more structured. You don't really get any backward cauliflowers, because even though it's not much of a grain in this paper, it's got enough grain for the pigment to settle into the troughs, so it doesn't swish around and just move around and it doesn't do what it wants. You have got some control. Now if we take a closer look, you can see how all the washes do merge quite nicely. Nothing is really out of control. And finally we have the Ash Rough, which, remember, Ash is a 100% rag paper. Bockingford is just wood pulp. So the pigment goes on this paper radically different. Now Ash paper or any rag paper is a joy to use. Everything is controllable, especially as this is rough, so all the pigment nothing is on the surface to just run around and do what it likes. It's nothing like that with this paper. You can paint with confidence on rag paper. Now if we go closer, once again we can see I've painted it quite loosely. There's not an awful lot of detail in the building because I wanted to concentrate on the different types of paper than the actual detail of the building itself. So it is quite a simplistic picture or pictures on all three. But we can see the dry brush this is ink, a bit some white ink just to give a little reflection, a bit of highlight on the water, and you can see how it is very dry brush. The clouds much more rough looking because of the rough texture. But going back to all three pictures at the same time: hot press, cold press, rough, and of course rag, 100% rag paper. You can see by the other two pictures they're lighter in tone than the rag paper. The rag paper soaks in more, much easier than on the pulp paper. So you can see, even though it was all the same washes, it looks far more contrasty. The shadows are far better on the rag. It just gives, I think, a more pleasing picture, even though all three are quite good when you view them at a required distance. So there's nothing wrong with Bockingford. It's a very, very good low price option, but if you can go for rag, then try some rag. You won't regret it. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this little demonstration of three types of paper. It was rather long, but I really feel like I wanted to show you step by step on all three pieces of paper so you could see the difference. And so I'll see you next time. So goodbye.